Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab. Now let's begin. The call came at 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that had started like any other. Louis Gregory was reviewing architectural blueprints for a commercial development in downtown Portland when his phone vibrated against the mahogany desk. The number was unfamiliar, but something made him answer immediately. "Daddy." The voice was small, broken by sobs and pain. "Daddy, I'm at the hospital." Louis's blood turned to ice. "Lucy? Baby, what happened? Where's your mother?" "Grandpa Howard. He threw me from the balcony." "But Daddy, he's telling everyone I fell." "I try to tell them, but the police, they believe him. They won't listen to me." His 8-year-old daughter's voice cracked. "It hurts so much. Please come." Louis was already moving, grabbing his keys, his mind shifting into a mode he hadn't accessed in 5 years. "Which hospital?" "Providence. Mommy's here, but she won't tell them the truth." The line went dead. Louis drove through Portland's afternoon traffic like a man possessed, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. His mind raced through possibilities, each one darker than the last. Howard Moreno throwing Lucy from balcony? His father-in-law was arrogant and cold, but this? And Kristen not backing up their daughter? 15 minutes later, Louis burst through the emergency room doors of Providence Portland Medical Center. He spotted them immediately. A cluster of uniforms around a hospital bed where Lucy lay, her small body attached to monitors, her left arm in a temporary cast, her face bruised and tear-streaked. "That's my daughter," Louis said, his voice carrying authority that made people instinctively move aside, until one of them turned around. Police Chief Stuart Huffman, a man Louis hadn't seen in 5 years, went absolutely white. His hand, which had been writing in a notebook, froze mid-word. "Sir," Huffman stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I had no idea she was your—" The reaction rippled through the room. 2 officers straightened immediately. A detective who'd been questioning Howard Moreno stopped mid-sentence. And Kristen, Louis's wife of 10 years, turned pale as death itself, her eyes wide with something that looked like terror. Louis ignored them all, moving to Lucy's bedside. His daughter's eyes opened, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "Daddy, I'm here, baby. I'm here now." He took her uninjured hand gently, examining the injuries with a practiced eye. Fractured left radius, contusions consistent with impact, possible concussion. From a second-story balcony, she was lucky to be alive. "Mr. Gregory," Huffman approached cautiously. We were told this was an accident. The child was playing near the balcony railing and my daughter just told me she was thrown." Louis's voice was calm, but everyone in the room felt the danger in it. "By Howard Moreno. And she told me that my wife witnessed it and said nothing." Kristen's face crumpled. "Louis, you don't understand." "Don't." He held up one hand, not looking at her. His eyes were on Huffman. "I want to know why my 8-year-old daughter's testimony was dismissed." Huffman shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Moreno said the child has been having behavioral issues. That she's been acting out since, well, he implied there were family problems." His wife corroborated the story, and Mrs. Gregory here said, "What exactly did my wife say?" The silence was answer enough. Louis finally looked at Kristen, really looked at her. The woman he'd married, who'd stood beside him through everything, now couldn't meet his eyes. "Louis, please," she whispered. "It's complicated." "No," he said quietly. "It's actually very simple. Did you see what happened?" I was inside. I heard Lucy scream, and when I came out, Mommy, you were right there." Lucy's voice was stronger now, fueled by the safety of her father's presence. "You saw Grandpa grab me. You saw him lift me over the railing. You were yelling at him to stop, and then you just stopped. You told me to say I fell." The room went silent. Louis saw it all clearly now. The fear in Kristen's eyes wasn't of him. It was of something else. Or someone else. "Chief Huffman," Louis said, his voice carrying the weight of command. "I'm going to need you to arrest Howard Moreno for attempted murder. And I'm going to need you to do it now." "Sir, this is a complicated situation. Mr. Moreno is a respected—" "Do you know what I did before I became an architect, Stuart?" Huffman swallowed hard. Everyone in the room was listening now. I spent 12 years in military intelligence. 8 of those years in Special Activities Division. I've briefed presidents. I've testified before Congress in closed sessions. I have security clearances that still make people nervous. Lewis's voice never rose above conversational level, but it filled the room. I walked away from all of it 5 years ago because I wanted a normal life for my family. But here's what you need to understand. I still have every contact, every resource, and every piece of leverage I accumulated during those years. And if you think for 1 second that I won't use all of it to protect my daughter and get justice for what was done to her, you're making a fatal miscalculation. Howard Moreno, who'd been standing near the door looking smug, finally spoke. This is ridiculous. Lewis, your daughter is clearly confused. The fall was traumatic. Shut up. Lewis didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The only reason you're still standing there instead of in handcuffs is that I'm giving Chief Huffman the opportunity to do this by the book. Don't make me do it another way. A nurse, her badge read Adriana Lozano, stepped forward hesitantly. Mr. Gregory? I was on duty when they brought your daughter in. I heard Mr. Moreno talking to his wife in the hallway before the police arrived. He said it needed to be done. She would have ruined everything. His wife was crying, saying there had to be another way. Howard's face flushed red. This woman is lying. I'll have her job. Record it, Lewis said to Huffman. Official statement. Now, Huffman nodded to one of his officers, who immediately pulled out a recording device. Lewis could see the police chief's mind working, recalculating. Whatever leverage Howard Moreno had in the city, and clearly he had some, it didn't compare to what Louis Gregory represented. Mr. Moreno, Huffman said, his voice steady now, I'm going to need you to come down to the station for questioning. This is outrageous. I'm a city councilman. I've donated millions to this city. My lawyers will. We'll meet you at the station, Huffman finished. Officer Raymond, please escort Mr. Moreno. As the officer, Bobby Raymond, according to his nameplate, moved forward, Lewis finally turned to Kristen. His wife was crying silently, her hands shaking. Why? He asked simply. He said if I didn't go along with it, he'd destroy you. He has something, Lewis. Something from your past. He said he could make sure you never worked again, that you'd lose everything. And you believed him enough to let him hurt our daughter. I didn't think he'd actually. I thought he was just trying to scare her. To scare us. When he grabbed her, I tried to stop him, but he was so angry. He said Lucy overheard something she shouldn't have. Something about his business dealings. He said she'd ruin everything if she told anyone. Lewis looked down at Lucy, who was watching her mother with betrayed eyes. An 8-year-old child, nearly killed because she'd heard something. The pieces were clicking into place, but Lewis kept his face neutral. What did you hear, sweetheart? He asked Lucy gently. I was playing in Grandpa's office. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I wanted to find the puzzle book he promised me. Lucy's voice was small. He was on the phone. He said something about judges and money, and that Grandma Bernadette didn't know where the real accounts were. That she thought the money was in Portland, but it was really in some other place. Cayman? I don't know what that means. Lewis knew exactly what it meant. And suddenly, Howard Moreno's desperate action made terrible sense. Chief Huffman, I think you're going to want to involve federal authorities on this one, Lewis said quietly. It sounds like Mr. Moreno has bigger problems than just what he did to my daughter. Huffman nodded slowly. I'll make the calls. As Bobby Raymond led Howard Moreno out, the older man still protesting, still making threats, Lewis sat beside Lucy's bed. His daughter looked up at him with complete trust, the kind of trust he'd nearly failed by not being here sooner. Am I in trouble, Daddy? For being in Grandpa's office? No, baby. You're not in trouble. You did nothing wrong. He brushed hair back from her forehead. But I need you to tell me everything you remember about what you heard. Can you do that? Lucy nodded, then winced at the movement. Will Grandpa really go to jail? Yes. Good. Her voice was fierce despite the pain. He's mean. He's always been mean. But nobody believed me before. Lewis felt a cold rage settle in his chest. How long had this been going on? How much had he missed while trusting that his family was safe? I believe you now, he said. And I promise you, Lucy, he will never hurt you again. Neither will anyone else who knew about this and did nothing. He looked at Kristen, who flinched under his gaze. The game had changed. Louis Gregory had spent 5 years trying to leave his old life behind. But some skills once learned never truly faded. And some battles, once joined, couldn't be walked away from. Howard Moreno had made the mistake of attacking Louis's child. Now he was about to learn what happened when you backed a trained predator into a corner, especially one who knew every dirty trick in the book and a few that hadn't been written yet. The war had just begun, and Louis intended to win. 3 hours later, Louis sat in a private waiting room while doctors finished Lucy's full examination. Kristen had been sent home, or rather, Louis had told her to leave and not come back until he said otherwise. She'd gone without argument, the weight of her choices finally settling on her shoulders. James Gregory, Louis's older brother, arrived within an hour of being called. He was a defense attorney, one of the best in the Pacific Northwest, and he took one look at Louis's face and said, "Who do I need to destroy? How much do you know about Howard Moreno's business dealings?" James settled into the chair across from Louis. The city councilman? Real estate developer? Major donor to half the city's political campaigns. He paused. Also your father-in-law, which is why I've never looked too closely. What? Louis told him everything. Lucy's call, the attempted murder, what she'd overheard. James's expression grew darker with each detail. Jesus Christ, James muttered. The Cayman accounts. Louis, if what Lucy heard is accurate, we're talking about major fraud. Probably bribery, maybe racketeering. Moreno's been building his empire for 30 years. If he's been hiding assets from his wife who presumably has a legal claim to half of everything in a divorce, Louis finished. Which means we're talking about tens of millions, maybe more. And an 8-year-old accidentally stumbled onto it. James ran a hand through his hair. This is bad, Louis. Really bad. Men like Moreno don't throw children off balconies on impulse. This was panic, which means whatever Lucy heard, it's enough to destroy him. Good. James studied his brother. You've got that look. The one you had when you came back from Damascus that time and wouldn't talk about it for 3 months. I'm going to take him apart, James. Piece by piece. Everything he's built, everything he's hidden, everyone he's paid off. I'm going to expose all of it and watch it burn. I'm not saying he doesn't deserve it, James said carefully. But you need to be smart about this. Moreno has reach. He has resources. And apparently, he has something on you that scared Kristen enough to make her complicit in her own daughter's near murder. Louis had been thinking about that. He claimed he could destroy my career and reputation. Something from my past. Is there something? There are plenty of somethings. I did Black Ops work for 12 years, James. There are operations I ran that are still classified. People I've dealt with. Some of it, if it came out the wrong way, could be twisted to look bad. How bad? Louis met his brother's eyes. Bad enough that I couldn't risk it 5 years ago when I had a 2-year-old daughter and a wife who thought I was just a boring intelligence analyst. I buried everything, took every precaution, used every favor owed to make sure my operational history stayed locked down. But I'm not that person anymore. And more importantly, I've spent 5 years building a normal life. I have documentation of everything. The reason I left, my exemplary record, the commendations, the thanks from senators and generals. If Moreno tries to expose anything, I have the firepower to bury him in context. James nodded slowly. So the leverage he thinks he has is probably something he half knows about and has wildly overestimated. Or he's bluffing entirely, hoping the threat alone would be enough to control Kristen. Which it was, Louis agreed bitterly. Because I never told her the full truth about what I did. I let her believe I was just a desk jockey with a security clearance. I thought I was protecting her. You were protecting everyone, James said. That's what you do, little brother. It's who you are. But now someone's crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. A knock at the door interrupted them. Stuart Huffman entered, looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past 3 hours. Mr. Gregory. He nodded to both brothers. I wanted to update you personally. Howard Moreno is being held without bail. The DA is filing charges of attempted murder, child endangerment, and witness intimidation. And he paused. We've been contacted by the FBI. Apparently your daughter's testimony about financial crimes has triggered some interest from their white-collar division. How much interest? Lewis asked. Enough that they're sending a team from the Seattle field office first thing tomorrow. They want to interview Lucy gently with child psychologists present about everything she heard. And they want to talk to you about your security clearances and how that might facilitate their investigation. Lewis smiled thinly. I see. Sir, I need to apologize, Huffman said, his discomfort obvious. When I arrived at the scene, I took Mr. Marino's word for what happened. I shouldn't have. The fact that his granddaughter was telling a different story should have been enough to— You did what powerful men have trained you to do, Lewis interrupted. You deferred to wealth and position. Howard Moreno has spent decades building that power. It's not entirely your fault that you fell into the pattern. That's generous of you, sir. I'm not being generous, Chief. I'm being accurate. But here's what happens now. You're going to make sure every I is dotted and every T is crossed on this case. Because I promise you, Moreno's lawyers are going to be the best money can buy, and they're going to look for any crack in your procedure to exploit. Understood. And one more thing. Lewis's voice hardened. I want to know who else knew. Who else Howard Moreno has been paying, influencing, or controlling. Because I guarantee you, a city councilman doesn't maintain the kind of power he has without a network. Huffman looked uncomfortable. That would be an internal affairs investigation. Then start one. Or I'll start asking questions publicly, and you won't like the answers I find. After Huffman left, James whistled low. You really are going to war. He threw my daughter off a balcony because she overheard a phone call. Lewis's voice was cold. War is the least of what's coming for Howard Moreno. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Heard what happened. I'm in Seattle. Need help? TM. Lewis stared at the message. Troy McCabe. They'd worked together in Syria, then again in Yemen. He was probably the most dangerous person Lewis had ever served with, and the most loyal. Maybe. Stay close. The reply came instantly. Already on my way. James saw his expression. Calling the cavalry? Just one rider. But he's enough. Another text, this time from Alan West. A lawyer Lewis had helped years ago with a matter involving compromised intelligence. The man owed Lewis his career and freedom. Heard through the grapevine about your situation. I'm available for anything you need. And I mean anything. Lewis typed back. I'll need someone who knows how to dig through financial records and doesn't mind getting creative with discovery. You interested? Where do we start? You're building a team, James observed. Howard Moreno is connected, wealthy, and desperate. He's also arrogant enough to think he can weather this storm. Lewis looked at his brother. I'm going to make sure he can't. And to do that, I need people who understand what's really at stake. Which is, my daughter almost died. My wife was compromised into betraying her own child. And somewhere in this city, there are people who knew what kind of man Howard Moreno was and enabled him anyway. Lewis stood, moving to the window overlooking the city lights. I walked away from the intelligence community because I wanted peace. But you know what I learned in 12 years of classified operations, James? What? That sometimes the only way to protect what matters is to absolutely destroy the threats against it. No half measures. No mercy. No letting them walk away to try again later. That sounds like the old Lewis talking. Good. Lewis turned back to his brother. Because the old Lewis knew how to win wars. And that's exactly what this is, a war. Howard Moreno just doesn't realize he's already lost. The night stretched ahead, full of planning and preparation. Lucy was safe, under guard, with doctors who knew she was to be protected at all costs. Kristen was somewhere, probably at her mother's house, finally realizing the magnitude of her betrayal. And Howard Moreno was in a cell, likely still thinking his money and connections would save him. Lewis pulled out his phone and started making calls. He had 5 years of contacts gathering dust, favors owed, and resources untapped. It was time to remind certain people that just because he'd left the game didn't mean he'd forgotten how to play. By dawn, Howard Moreno would understand what it meant to make an enemy of Lewis Gregory. And by the time Lewis was done, the man would have nothing left but regrets. Lucy was moved to a private room on the pediatric floor around midnight. Lewis sat beside her bed, watching her sleep, cataloging every bruise, every scrape, every injury his daughter had suffered because he hadn't been there to protect her. He'd failed her. The knowledge sat in his chest like broken glass. His phone vibrated silently. A message from Troy McCabe. Checked into the Heathman. Room 423. Ready when you are. Another from Alan West. Started preliminary research on Moreno's business holdings. You're going to want to see this. Multiple shell companies, 3 separate real estate portfolios, and at least 2 foundations that look suspicious. Call me tomorrow. And then, unexpectedly, one from Adriana Lozano, the nurse. Mr. Gregory, I know I probably shouldn't be contacting you, but I wanted you to know that what I heard wasn't the only thing. Mr. Moreno made several calls from the hallway. He kept mentioning someone named Ignacio, and he seemed really worried about the judge finding out. I don't know if that helps, but I thought you should know. Ignacio, the judge. Pieces of a puzzle Lewis was determined to solve. He was typing a response when the door opened softly. James entered carrying 2 coffees and a folder. Thought you might need this, he said, handing over 1 cup. And I couldn't sleep, so I did some research on Howard Moreno's political career. Public record stuff, but interesting. James opened the folder. He's been on the city council for 15 years. Before that, he was a developer who made his fortune during the housing boom of the 90s. But here's what's interesting. His company, Moreno Development Group, has won 70% of the city contracts it bid on in the past decade. That's a high percentage. Impossibly high. Especially considering that in at least 15 of those cases, there were lower bids from competing firms. James pulled out a spreadsheet. I cross-referenced the votes on those contracts with the council members who approved them. Want to guess who the primary sponsor was on every single one? Let me guess. Someone Moreno had leverage over. Not just someone. For different council members, 2 city planners, and at least 3 members of the zoning board. All of them voted in favor of Moreno projects, sometimes against the recommendations of city engineers or financial advisors. Lewis studied the names. You think he was bribing them? I think he was doing something to ensure their loyalty. Whether it's money, blackmail, or something else, I don't know. But the pattern is clear. Howard Moreno has been running this city's development decisions for a decade. And Bernadette Moreno, his wife, knows nothing about it. According to public records, she's been largely absent from his business dealings since around 2010. Before that, she was listed as a partner in several ventures. After? Nothing. She serves on charity boards, hosts fundraisers, plays the society wife. What happened in 2010? James flipped through his notes. Their daughter, your wife, went to college. Kristen left for Northwestern that fall. Maybe Bernadette stepped back to focus on other things. Or maybe that's when Howard started hiding assets from her. Lewis sipped his coffee, thinking. Lucy said she heard Howard mention that Bernadette didn't know where the real accounts were. If he's been planning to cut her out of their wealth for 15 years, then we're talking about a long-term strategy to commit fraud against his own wife while simultaneously building a corrupt empire. James closed the folder. Lewis, this is bigger than just throwing Lucy off a balcony. This is organized crime level stuff. I know, and you're planning to expose all of it. I am. James sighed. Okay, then we do this smart. We build an airtight case. We work with the FBI, let them handle the criminal investigation while we focus on protecting Lucy and making sure Moreno can't hurt anyone else. That's the official plan, Lewis agreed. What's the unofficial plan? Lewis looked at his brother. The unofficial plan is that I make sure Howard Moreno suffers. Not just legally, not just financially. I want him to feel the same terror Lucy felt when he threw her off that balcony. I want him to lose everything he cares about, everything he's built, everything he thought made him powerful. That's dark, Lewis. You hurt my child. I understand that. I do. But you need to be careful. Men like Moreno, when they're cornered, they get dangerous. I spent 12 years being dangerous for a living, James. Howard Moreno is an amateur. Lewis stood, moving to the window. Portland's lights stretched out below, a city that had no idea one of its most powerful figures was about to fall. Besides, he made a critical mistake. What's that? He threw Lucy off a balcony, but she survived, which means she can testify. She can tell investigators everything she heard. And once that happens, once the FBI starts pulling threads, his entire empire is going to unravel. Unless he tries to silence her, James said quietly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. If he tries, Lewis said, his voice absolutely calm, then I stop playing by any rules at all. James looked at his brother, really looked at him, and saw something that made him remember why Louis Gregory had been so valuable to his country for 12 years, and why his enemies had feared him. I'll make sure the DA knows to take all threats seriously, James said. Good. And James? Thank you for dropping everything and coming here. You're my brother, and Lucy is my niece. There's nowhere else I'd be. After James left, Lewis returned to his vigil beside Lucy's bed. His daughter stirred, her eyes fluttering open. Daddy, I'm here, sweetheart. I had a bad dream. Grandpa was chasing me again. Lewis took her hand carefully, avoiding the foreline. He can't chase you anymore, Lucy. He's locked up, and I promise you, I'm going to make sure he stays locked up for a very, very long time. Forever. As close to forever as I can manage. Lucy was quiet for a moment. Then, Daddy, I'm sorry I went in Grandpa's office. If I hadn't, then maybe... Stop. Lewis's voice was firm but gentle. You did nothing wrong. None of this is your fault. Grandpa Howard did bad things, and he did them because he's a bad person. That's not on you. But I got hurt. Yes. And that should never have happened. But you're going to heal. And I'm going to make sure he pays for what he did. Ow! Lewis smiled, but it wasn't a happy expression. By being smarter than him. By finding everyone who helped him. And by taking away everything that makes him feel powerful. Is that what you used to do? Before you drew buildings? Out of the mouths of babes. Something like that. Mommy says you used to have secrets. Important ones. I did. Are you going to use them to stop Grandpa? Lewis thought about how to answer. His 8-year-old daughter deserved honesty, but she'd already been through so much. Yes, he said finally. I'm going to use everything I know, everything I learned, to make sure Grandpa can never hurt you or anyone else again. Is that okay with you? Lucy nodded solemnly. Good. Because he's really bad, Daddy. Badder than you think. What do you mean? Sometimes when Mommy and I visited, I'd hear him talking to Grandma Bernadette. He'd say mean things about how she was stupid and how she didn't deserve anything and how she was lucky he didn't leave her. Lucy's voice was small. I didn't like how he talked to her. It made me sad. Another piece of the puzzle. Howard Moreno wasn't just corrupt and criminal. He was abusive. The man had spent years terrorizing his own wife, building his power while tearing her down. Does Grandma Bernadette know you're here? Lewis asked. I don't think so. She's been at some spa thing. Mommy said Grandpa sent her away for a few weeks. Convenient. Howard attacks Lucy while his wife is conveniently absent. No witnesses except Kristen, whom he'd already compromised. Lewis needed to talk to Bernadette Moreno. She might be the key to everything. Get some sleep, sweetheart, he told Lucy. I'll be right here. You won't leave. Not for a second. As Lucy drifted back to sleep, Lewis pulled out his phone and texted Troy McCabe. Need you to find someone for me. Bernadette Moreno. Wife of the target. She's supposedly at a spa. I need to know where, and I need to talk to her before her husband's lawyers do. The response came within seconds. On it. Give me 2 hours. Then Lewis texted Adriana Lozano. Thank you for the information about Ignacio and the judge. If you hear or remember anything else, please let me know. Your testimony might help put a dangerous man away. I'll help however I can. Nobody should hurt a child like that. Lewis set his phone down and looked at his daughter. She looked so small in the hospital bed, so fragile. The protective rage that had been simmering since her phone call crystallized into cold determination. Howard Moreno had thrown his granddaughter off a balcony. He'd corrupted a city government. He'd abused his wife. He'd terrorized his daughter into compliance. And now Louis Gregory, a man who'd spent 12 years learning how to dismantle threats to national security, was going to teach Howard Moreno what happened when you picked the wrong family to destroy. The war had begun, and Lewis wasn't going to stop until Howard Moreno had nothing left but ashes and regrets. Outside, Portland slept, unaware that one of its most powerful men was about to learn a very hard lesson about consequences. Inside room 412, Louis Gregory kept watch over his daughter and planned his revenge. Dawn came cold and gray, Portland's typical November weather rolling in with fog and drizzle. Louis hadn't slept. He'd spent the night alternating between watching Lucy and reviewing everything he knew about Howard Moreno's empire. Troy McCabe had delivered as always. A text at 4:30 a.m. Bernadette Moreno checked into Salishan Coastal Lodge in Glenadon Beach under her maiden name, Bernadette Allison. Been there for 2 weeks. Paid in cash. Interesting detail. Her credit cards show she's supposed to be at a spa in Arizona. Someone's lying about where she is. That was interesting. Either Howard had sent his wife away and lied about where, or Bernadette had gone into hiding on her own. Louis needed to find out which. At 6 a.m., a doctor came to check on Lucy. Dr. Viola Fleming, according to her badge, was a pediatric orthopedist with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. Mr. Gregory, she said after examining Lucy's arm. Good news. The fracture is clean. She'll need the cast for 6 weeks, but I expect full recovery. The contusions will heal on their own, though she'll be sore for a while. And her psychological state? Dr. Fleming's expression sobered. That's going to take longer. She's been through significant trauma. I'm recommending a child psychologist, someone who specializes in abuse cases. I can make some referrals. Please do. Whatever she needs. There's one more thing. Dr. Fleming lowered her voice. I reviewed the x-rays and the injury patterns. Mr. Gregory, your daughter has old injuries. Healed fractures in her right wrist, bruising patterns on her upper arms that are consistent with being grabbed forcefully. This wasn't the first time someone hurt her. Louis felt his blood turn to ice. How old? The wrist fracture is maybe 6 months healed. The bruising patterns are more recent, within the past few months. Why wasn't this reported? According to her medical history, the wrist fracture was explained as a playground injury. The other incidents. Dr. Fleming shook her head. If she wasn't brought to a doctor, they wouldn't have been documented. Louis closed his eyes, fighting for control. 6 months. Howard Moreno had been hurting Lucy for at least 6 months, and nobody had noticed. Or worse, Kristen had noticed and said nothing. Thank you, doctor, he managed. After Dr. Fleming left, Louis stepped into the hallway and called James. It's not even 7, his brother answered groggily. Lucy has old injuries, healed fractures, bruise patterns consistent with abuse. It's been going on for months. Silence. Then, Jesus Christ, Louis. I need you to amend the charges. This wasn't a one-time incident. This was ongoing abuse that escalated to attempted murder. I'll call the DA. They'll want the medical records. They can have everything. Every x-ray, every report, every piece of evidence that shows Howard Moreno is a monster who is systematically abusing his granddaughter. What about Kristen? What about her? Did she know? She had to have known, James. You can't live with a child for 6 months and not notice injuries. Then we might be looking at charges against her too. Failure to report child endangerment. I don't care. Louis's voice was flat. She chose to protect her father instead of our daughter. Whatever happens to her, she earned. After hanging up, Louis stood in the quiet hospital corridor, watching the sunrise through the windows. Somewhere out there, Howard Moreno was probably still confident, still believing his money and power would save him. That confidence was about to be shattered. Louis's phone rang. Stuart Huffman. Mr. Gregory, I wanted to give you a heads up. The FBI is here. They want to interview your daughter this morning, and they want to talk to you about your security background. I'll be ready. Make sure they bring a child psychologist. Already arranged. Mr. Gregory, I've been doing some digging like you asked. Howard Moreno's network runs deep. I found connections to at least 6 city officials, 3 judges, and multiple contractors. If what your daughter heard is accurate, we're looking at a corruption scandal that could bring down half the city government. Good. You don't seem surprised. I spent 12 years hunting people who thought they were untouchable, Chief. Howard Moreno is just another criminal who got too comfortable. The only difference is this one hurt my family, which means I'm not bound by the same rules I used to follow. Huffman was silent for a moment. Sir, I need to advise you not to take any actions that might compromise the investigation. Noted. But Chief, if I find evidence of crimes and turn it over to appropriate authorities, that's not compromising anything. That's being a concerned citizen. As long as we're clear on the boundaries. Crystal clear. After hanging up, Lewis texted Troy, need a favor. Look into 3 judges who might be on Moreno's payroll. Start with anyone who's ruled favorably on his development projects or city contracts. I need leverage. Already on it. Found something interesting though, Ignacio Robertson. He's Moreno's lawyer. Also his wife's cousin. And he's been moving money for Moreno through offshore accounts for years. Want you to document it? Document everything. Make copies. Store them somewhere safe. Roger that. Lewis returned to Lucy's room just as she was waking up. His daughter looked better. The pain medication was working, and she'd slept through most of the night. Morning, Daddy. Morning, sweetheart. How are you feeling? Sore. But better. She paused. Is Mommy coming? Lewis had been dreading this conversation. Not right now. Mommy. She made some mistakes, Lucy. She didn't protect you like she should have. So, she's not going to be visiting until we figure some things out. Is she in trouble? Yes. Lucy absorbed this. Then good. She should have told the truth. At 9 a.m., the FBI arrived. Special Agent Brandon Hurley was a trim man in his 40s with sharp eyes and a gentle manner with Lucy. He was accompanied by a child psychologist, Dr. Grace Gray, who immediately put Lucy at ease. The interview took 2 hours. Lucy, remarkably composed, told them everything. What she'd heard in Howard's office, the phone call she'd overheard over the past months, things Howard had said about keeping the judge happy and making sure Ignacio covered the tracks. She also, heartbreakingly, described the times Howard had hurt her before, grabbing her arm hard enough to leave bruises, pushing her into walls, breaking her wrist accidentally when she'd knocked over a drink at his house. Lewis sat through it all, his face carved from stone, his hands clenched so tight his knuckles were white. When the interview was over and Lucy was resting again, Special Agent Hurley pulled Lewis aside. Mr. Gregory, your daughter's testimony is extremely valuable. If even half of what she described is accurate, we're looking at multiple federal charges: wire fraud, racketeering, corruption, money laundering. And that's before we get to the assault charges. What do you need from me? Your expertise. I understand you have significant intelligence experience. We could use someone who knows how to trace offshore accounts and shell companies. Someone who understands how these networks operate. I'm happy to consult, but I have one condition. What's that? I want complete access to everything you find on Howard Moreno. Every document, every connection, every piece of dirt. I'll sign whatever NDAs you want, but I need to know everything. Holly studied him. You're planning something. I'm planning to make sure my daughter gets justice. And if that means I use my knowledge and resources to accelerate the investigation, then that's what I'm going to do. As long as it stays legal. Lewis smiled thinly. Define legal. Mr. Gregory. Agent Hurley. I spent 12 years operating in gray areas most people can't even imagine. I know exactly where the lines are. I also know how to walk right up to them without crossing over. Trust me when I say that everything I do will be admissible in court and completely defensible. Hurley sighed. Fine. But if you find something, you bring it to us first. Agreed. After the FBI left, Lewis finally had a moment alone. He stepped outside the hospital, breathing in the cold November air, and called Troy McCabe. Talk to me. Troy answered. I need you in Portland. Bring everything you've got on surveillance, document recovery, and electronic tracking. Already packed. I'll be there by tonight. Good. Because we're going hunting. Who's the target? Howard Moreno's entire network. Everyone who knew what he was doing and said nothing. Everyone who took his money. Everyone who helped him build his corrupt empire. That's a lot of targets. Then we'd better get started. Lewis hung up and allowed himself one moment of pure, cold rage. Howard Moreno had spent years building power on the backs of intimidation, corruption, and abuse. He'd hurt a child multiple times. He'd corrupted a city government. He'd terrorized his own family. Now he was about to learn what happened when you made an enemy of someone who actually knew how to fight back. The first shots had been fired. The investigation was underway. But that was just the official battle. Louis Gregory was about to wage a very different kind of war. One fought in the shadows, using every skill he'd learned and every contact he'd made over 12 years of intelligence work. By the time he was done, Howard Moreno would have nothing left. No power, no wealth, no respect, no freedom. Just the crushing knowledge that he'd destroyed himself the moment he laid hands on Lucy Gregory. The hunt was on, and Louis Gregory always caught his prey. By mid-afternoon, Louis had transformed Lucy's hospital room into a command center. His laptop was set up on the rolling table, connected to a secure VPN that routed through 3 different countries. James sat in one corner, reviewing legal documents. Troy McCabe, who'd arrived earlier than expected, occupied the windowsill like a coiled spring. Lucy was napping again, exhausted from the FBI interview, but finally safe. Okay, Louis said, pulling up his first set of findings. Here's what we know. Howard Moreno owns Moreno Development Group, which is 38 subsidiary companies spread across 4 states. But the interesting part is the ownership structure. He displayed a complex web of connections. Officially, Howard owns 60%. His business partner Cliff Molina owns 20%, and the remaining 20% is held by something called the Pacific Northwest Development Trust. Let me guess, James said. The trust is a shell. Exactly, and it's managed by none other than Ignacio Robertson, Moreno's lawyer and Bernadette's cousin. The trust was established in 2010, the same year Bernadette stopped being listed as a partner in any of Howard's ventures. Troy whistled, so he pushed her out and replaced her with a shell company he controls. It gets better. The trust has accounts in the Cayman Islands, Luxembourg, and Singapore. And over the past 15 years, it's received approximately $47 million in what looks like consulting fees from Moreno Development Group. James sat up straight. Consulting fees? For what? That's the question. Because there's no documentation of any actual consulting work. Which means it's a money laundering scheme, James finished. He's moving assets out of the company and into offshore accounts that Bernadette doesn't know about. Correct. And here's the clever part. The money isn't sitting idle. It's being reinvested in properties and developments under different company names. Names like Columbia River Holdings, Portland Investment Partners, and Cascade Property Development. Troy leaned forward. Who owns those? Officially? Various investors and holding companies. But when you dig deep enough, they all trace back to the Pacific Northwest Development Trust, which means Howard Moreno owns them. He's been building a second empire using money he embezzled from his own company, hiding it from his wife and co-owners. That's fraud on multiple levels, James said, his lawyer brain lighting up. Embezzlement, tax evasion, breach of fiduciary duty, and probably racketeering if we can prove he used those companies to win city contracts through bribery. Louis pulled up another document, which brings us to the judge. Lucy mentioned him, and I found references in some of Howard's email communications. How did you get his emails? James asked carefully. Let's just say that Howard Moreno's cybersecurity is embarrassingly weak, and I happen to know how to exploit that. Louis smiled. And before you ask, yes, I made sure to document how I access the information in a way that can be sanitized for legal discovery. Translation: you hacked him, but made it look like you found publicly accessible information. I prefer to think of it as creative research methodology. Troy laughed. Same old Louis. Louis continued. The judge is Randolph Alexander. He's a circuit court judge who's presided over 15 cases involving Moreno Development Group or its subsidiaries over the past 10 years. Want to guess how many times he ruled in favor of Moreno? All 15, James guessed. 14. He ruled against Moreno once on a minor zoning issue. Every other time, including 3 cases where Moreno's company was clearly in the wrong, Judge Alexander found legal justification to rule in his favor. And in exchange, Louis pulled up bank records. In exchange, the judge's wife, Carolina Alexander, is a major shareholder in a company called Willamette River Properties, which is owned by the Pacific Northwest Development Trust, James and Troy said in unison. Exactly. Mrs. Alexander has made approximately $2 million in dividends over the past 8 years. Money she didn't earn from a company she didn't invest in because her husband was making favorable rulings. That's the quid pro quo, James said, excitement building in his voice. That's the corruption charge the FBI needs. If we can prove Howard set up that arrangement, we can. Lewis displayed an email. This is from Ignacio Robertson to Howard Moreno, dated March 2016. Spoke with RA about the property dispute. He's willing to be creative with his interpretation of the statute, but his wife expects her usual compensation. Should I proceed with the transfer? And Howard's response, do it. The judge has been invaluable. Keep him happy. Troy shook his head. He literally wrote down his bribery scheme. Rich, powerful men often believe they're untouchable, Lewis said. They get comfortable, complacent. They don't think about digital trails or future consequences. This is enough to bring him down, James said. Between Lucy's testimony, these financial records, and the evidence of bribery, the FBI can build an ironclad case. That's the official case, Lewis agreed. But there's more work to do. I want to identify everyone in Howard Moreno's network. Every politician he's bought. Every official he's compromised. Every business partner who knew what he was doing. Why? Troy asked. If the FBI has enough to put him away. Because taking down Howard Moreno isn't enough. These people enabled him. They profited from his corruption. They turned a blind eye when he abused his power. Lewis's voice was hard. And more importantly, they're the reason Lucy got hurt. If the system was working, if these officials were doing their jobs instead of cashing Howard's checks, my daughter wouldn't have a broken arm right now. So you're going after all of them, James said. All of them, Lewis confirmed. I'm going to expose every connection, every payoff, every dirty deal. And I'm going to do it in a way that makes it impossible for them to hide or escape consequences. His phone buzzed. A text from Alan West, the lawyer, found something big. 3 properties listed under different names all have the same registration address. A P.O. box registered to Bernadette Moreno's maiden name. But she has no knowledge of these properties. I think Howard's been setting her up for fraud charges. Lewis stared at the message, cold fury building. That son of a bitch. What? James asked. Howard's not just stealing from his wife. He's been registering properties and accounts in her name, her maiden name, setting her up to take the fall if his schemes ever got discovered. So, when the FBI starts investigating, Troy said slowly, they'll find fraud connected to Bernadette Moreno, née Allison. She'll look like a co-conspirator. Exactly. And if she can't prove she had no knowledge of these accounts, she could face charges alongside her husband. Lewis typed rapidly, which means we need to get a Bernadette before Howard's lawyers do. We need her testimony that she had no knowledge of any of this. I'll go, Troy offered. Glenadon Beach is only 90 minutes away. No, I'm going. Lewis stood. James, stay with Lucy. Troy, keep digging into Howard's network. I want names, dates, amounts, everything we can use. You sure you want to leave, Lucy? James asked. Lewis looked at his sleeping daughter. Lucy's safe here, under guard, with you watching over her. But Bernadette Moreno is a victim too. And if I don't get to her first, Howard's going to sacrifice her to save himself. I can't let that happen. Even though she's Kristen's mother. Especially because of that. Bernadette doesn't deserve to pay for her husband's crimes. Lewis grabbed his jacket. And besides, if she knows even half of what Howard's been doing, her testimony will be invaluable. Troy tossed him a set of keys. Rental car in the garage. Black Charger, spot 47. How did you? I figured you'd need wheels. GPS is clean, tank is full, and there's a go bag in the trunk with everything you might need. Lewis smiled. It's good to work with professionals again. Just like old times, boss. As Lewis headed for the door, James called out, be careful. If Howard figures out what you're doing, he'll do what? Come after me. Lewis's voice was cold. Let him try. I'm not the one who needs to be afraid. 45 minutes later, Lewis was on Highway 101, driving south along the Oregon coast. The November weather had cleared slightly, revealing dramatic cliffs and crashing waves. Under other circumstances, it would have been beautiful. Now it was just another battlefield. His phone rang through the car's Bluetooth. Stuart Huffman. Mr. Gregory, I thought you should know. Howard Moreno made bail. Lewis's hands tightened on the wheel. Ow! His lawyer, Ignacio Robertson, argued that he was a pillar of the community with no flight risk. Judge signed off on $2 million bail. Moreno posted it 30 minutes ago. Which judge? Alexander. Randolph Alexander. Of course. The judge was protecting his investment. Where's Moreno now? He's required to wear an ankle monitor and can't leave the Portland metro area. He's also forbidden from contacting you, your daughter, or any witnesses. That won't stop him from calling his associates and trying to protect his assets. No, it won't. Which is why the FBI has already started seizing accounts and issuing warrants. But Mr. Gregory, be careful. Moreno knows you're coming for him now. Men like that, when they're desperate. I know what desperate men do, Chief. I've dealt with worse than Howard Moreno. After hanging up, Lewis called Troy. Change of plans. Howard's out on bail. Son of a bitch. How? Judge Alexander. Which means we need to move faster. Troy, I need you to watch Lucy. James is there, but I want someone with operational experience keeping an eye on things. On my way. What about you? I'm getting Bernadette's testimony. Then I'm coming back to Portland, and we're going to accelerate this whole operation. Lewis, if Howard's out, he's going to be scrambling to protect his assets and silence witnesses. Let him scramble. Every move he makes now will just give us more evidence. And besides, Lewis allowed himself a cold smile. He doesn't know I'm coming yet. By the time he figures out what's happening, it'll be too late. That's the Lewis Gregory the first remember. The Salishan Coastal Lodge was a sprawling resort complex nestled among pines, overlooking the Pacific. Lewis found it easily, then spent 20 minutes observing before approaching. Old habits died hard. No obvious security. No signs of surveillance. Bernadette Moreno was either very good at hiding or truly had no idea the storm that was about to break over her family. Lewis walked into the main lodge and approached the front desk with a story already prepared. I'm looking for my aunt, he told the receptionist, a young woman named Kelly. Bernadette Allison? I know she checked in a couple weeks ago. There's a family emergency and I need to reach her. Kelly checked her computer. I'm sorry, sir, but I can't confirm guest information. Lewis pulled out his phone, showing a photo of Bernadette from a society event. This is her. Please, it's urgent. Her granddaughter was injured. Kelly's expression softened. Let me call her room. 3 minutes later, Lewis was knocking on room 247. The woman who answered was 56 years old, but looked older, her face lined with stress and her eyes puffy from crying. Bernadette Moreno? Lewis asked gently. Allison, she corrected automatically. Then recognition dawned. Lewis? What are you doing here? Where's Kristen? Is something wrong? Can I come in? We need to talk. Bernadette hesitated, then stepped back. Her room was neat but clearly lived in, with clothes hung carefully in the closet and books stacked on the nightstand. What's happened? She asked, fear evident in her voice. When did you last talk to Howard? Not for 2 weeks. He sent me here, said I needed rest. Said he'd handle everything back home. She searched Lewis's face. Something's wrong. What's happened? Lewis decided on directness. Howard threw Lucy off a second-story balcony yesterday. She survived, but she has a broken arm and multiple contusions. Bernadette went white. She reached for the bed to steady herself. No, Howard wouldn't. Lucy's his granddaughter. He threw her because she overheard him on the phone discussing offshore accounts and bribing judges. He tried to kill her to protect his criminal empire. Criminal empire? Lewis, what are you talking about? Your husband has been embezzling millions from his company, hiding assets from you, and running a corruption scheme that spans years and involves multiple city officials. And he's been setting you up to take the fall. Bernadette sat heavily on the bed. I don't understand. Lewis sat across from her and told her everything. Lucy's testimony, the offshore accounts, the shell companies registered in her maiden name, the bribery scheme, all of it. Bernadette listened in growing horror, tears streaming down her face. I knew he was cruel, she whispered when Lewis finished. I knew he was controlling. But this? Lucy? My God, Lewis, I would never have. She looked up at him, devastated. Is she okay? She'll recover physically. Emotionally, that'll take longer. And Kristen knew what Howard did and said nothing. She chose to protect him instead of our daughter. Bernadette closed her eyes. I'm so sorry, Louis. I failed both of them. I should have left Howard years ago, but I was afraid. He controlled everything, the money, the house, my whole life. I thought if I just stayed quiet, just played the role he wanted. You're a victim too, Bernadette. Am I? Because right now it feels like I'm complicit. I saw the signs. I knew Howard was cruel to Kristen when she was growing up. I knew he was probably hurting Lucy, but I told myself it wasn't that bad, that I was overreacting that. Stop, Louis said firmly. Howard is responsible for his actions, not you. But Bernadette, I need your help now. The FBI is investigating him, and they're going to find all these accounts and properties registered in your name. If you don't testify that you had no knowledge of them, you could face charges. I'll testify. I'll tell them everything I know, which honestly isn't much. Howard kept me completely separate from his business dealings. That's going to be your strongest defense. But I need you to come back to Portland with me. Now, before Howard's lawyers get to you and convince you to stay silent. Bernadette wiped her eyes. Give me 10 minutes to pack. While she gathered her things, Louis called Troy. Got her. We're coming back. ETA, 3 hours. Good. Because things are heating up here. Howard's lawyer just held a press conference claiming Lucy's testimony is unreliable because she's traumatized. He's also threatening to sue the hospital for releasing medical information. Let him threaten. Every statement he makes now can be used against him later. There's more. Someone tried to access Lucy's room. Security stopped him, but Louis, it was Ed Santos, Howard's chief of staff. The cold rage that Louis had been keeping controlled flared hot. Was Lucy hurt? No. Security had him out before he got close. But the intent was clear. Where is Santos now? Released with a warning. Hospital security didn't want to press charges. Find him. I want to know where he goes, who he talks to, everything. And Troy, use whatever methods necessary. Copy that. After hanging up, Louis went to the window, looking out at the gray ocean. Howard Moreno had just made his second major mistake. The first was throwing Lucy off a balcony. The second was trying to intimidate Louis Gregory's family while Louis was still in play. That mistake was going to cost Howard everything. The drive back to Portland was quiet. Bernadette sat in the passenger seat, occasionally crying silently, sometimes asking questions about Lucy that Louis answered honestly. By the time they reached the city limits, she'd heard the full story. The abuse, the attempted murder, Kristen's complicity, all of it. I'm going to divorce him, Bernadette said as they neared the hospital. As soon as possible. I don't care about the money or the house or any of it. I just want to be free of him. Actually, you should care about the money, Louis said, because half of everything Howard owns is legally yours. And I'm going to make sure you get every penny he tried to hide. I don't want his dirty money. Then donate it. Use it to help other victims of domestic abuse. Use it to fund programs that protect children. But don't let Howard Moreno keep the fortune he built through corruption and abuse. Bernadette considered this. You're right. He doesn't deserve to keep anything. They arrived at Providence Portland Medical Center just after 8 p.m. Security had been increased. Troy's doing, Louis suspected. He escorted Bernadette up to Lucy's floor, where James and Troy were standing guard. Grandma, Lucy's voice came from inside the room. Bernadette rushed to her granddaughter's bedside, tears flowing freely. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's okay, Grandma. Daddy said it's not your fault. I should have protected you. Both you and your mother. You're protecting me now, Lucy said simply. Louis pulled James and Troy aside. Status. FBI came back with more questions, James reported. They're moving fast on the financial crimes. Already froze 3 accounts and issued warrants for Moreno's business records. And Ed Santos? Troy smiled grimly. Followed him to a bar in northwest Portland. He met with 2 other men, Cliff Molina, Moreno's business partner, and Stuart Huffman. Louis's eyes narrowed. The police chief? The very same. They talked for about an hour. I couldn't get audio, but I got photos and video of them together. After Santos tried to access Lucy's room, Huffman is meeting with Howard's associates? James said, that's conspiracy. Or Huffman is investigating, Troy countered. Could go either way. Find out which, Lewis ordered. I need to know if Huffman is compromised or if he's doing his job. His phone rang. An unknown number, but Lewis answered anyway. Mr. Gregory? A raspy voice, cultured, careful. This is Ignacio Robertson. I represent Howard Moreno. I know who you are. What do you want? I'd like to propose a meeting. My client is willing to discuss a settlement regarding your daughter's unfortunate accident. It wasn't an accident. It was attempted murder. That's one interpretation. My client maintains that Lucy fell while playing, and that the family stress has caused certain exaggerations in her account. Your client is a liar and a criminal, and you're complicit in everything he's done. A pause. Mr. Gregory, I understand you're upset, but making accusations without proof. I have proof, Ignacio. Bank records, email correspondence, documentation of every offshore account, every shell company, every bribe, including the money you've been moving for Howard for the past 15 years. The silence on the other end was telling. I don't know what you think you have, Ignacio started. I have everything, and tomorrow morning, I'm delivering it all to the FBI. But here's what I'm offering you. Cooperate fully with their investigation, testify against Howard, and return every penny you helped him steal. Do that, and maybe you only lose your law license instead of your freedom. You can't prove any of this. Try me. Lewis hung up and looked at his team. That's going to shake things up. Ignacio will go straight to Howard, and Howard will start making panicked moves. Which gives us more evidence, Troy said. Exactly. Now let's talk about next steps. They moved to a private conference room down the hall. Lewis pulled out his laptop and displayed everything he'd compiled. Here's where we are. Financial crimes are covered. The FBI has enough to charge Howard with fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, and money laundering. The bribery charges are solid. We have paper trails connecting Howard to Judge Alexander and at least 3 city council members. What about the attempted murder of Lucy? James asked. That's prosecutorial. Lucy's testimony is powerful, especially combined with her medical records showing prior abuse. Adriana Lozano's testimony about what she overheard adds credibility. And now we have Bernadette willing to testify about Howard's controlling behavior and capacity for violence. But, Troy prompted, but Howard's lawyers are going to argue that Lucy's testimony is unreliable due to trauma. They'll argue that the prior injuries were accidents. They'll paint Howard as a loving grandfather who would never intentionally harm his granddaughter, which is where the corruption charges help, James said. They establish motive. Howard threw Lucy off the balcony because she discovered his criminal enterprise. The financial crimes prove he had something to protect, right? But there's still a chance he walks on the attempted murder charge. Rich men with good lawyers sometimes do. So what's your play? Troy asked. Lewis smiled. We make sure he can't walk on anything. We expose every crime, every connection, every piece of corruption. We turn this into such a massive scandal that no judge, no jury, no parole board will ever be sympathetic to Howard Moreno. He pulled up a new document. This is everyone in Howard's network that we've identified so far. Judge Randolph Alexander. Council members Jose Booth, Alfredo Chambers, and Minnie King. City planner Bobby Raymond. Wait, that can't be right. What? James leaned forward. Bobby Raymond. The police officer who escorted Howard out of the hospital yesterday. He's listed here as Howard's nephew by marriage. So Howard has family on the police force, Troy said. That's how he thought he could control the narrative. Except Officer Raymond didn't know his uncle was going up against me, Lewis said. And now he's potentially implicated in obstruction if he was trying to help Howard. Lewis continued down the list. We've got contractors who paid kickbacks, developers who colluded on bids, even a reporter, Susie Abair from the Tribune, who's been writing fluff pieces about Howard's philanthropy while ignoring complaints about his business practices. That's a lot of people to take down, James observed. Not take down. Expose. There's a difference. Some of these people are complicit criminals who deserve prison. Others are just cowards who look the other way. But all of them need to face consequences. Ow, Troy asked. Lewis pulled up a final document. We're going to create a comprehensive dossier. Everything we've found, documented, cross-referenced, and verified. Then we're going to deliver copies to the FBI, the State Attorney General, the Portland Tribune, the Oregonian, and every major news outlet in the state. That's going to cause chaos, James said. Good. Let be chaotic. Let the public see exactly how corrupt their city government has become. Let them see how Howard Moreno and his network operated with impunity for years. And let everyone who enabled him face the consequences. What about Kristen? James asked quietly. Lewis was silent for a moment. What about her? She's your wife. She's Lucy's mother. Are you including her in the expose? She chose her father over our daughter. She's complicit in child abuse and obstruction of justice. So yes, James, she's included. That's going to be painful for Lucy. More painful than learning her mother stood by while her grandfather threw her off a balcony? Lucy already knows what Kristen did. This isn't about punishing Kristen. It's about making sure everyone who had a hand in hurting my daughter faces appropriate consequences. James nodded slowly. Okay, then let's do this right. They worked through the night, organizing evidence, preparing documents, and building the case that would bring down Howard Moreno's entire network. Troy handled surveillance and security, making sure no one else tried to reach Lucy or interfere with her work. James focused on the legal framework, ensuring everything they presented would be admissible in court. And Lewis coordinated it all, using skills he'd honed over 12 years of intelligence work to create a comprehensive, devastating picture of corruption that would be impossible to ignore or dismiss. By dawn, they were ready. By sunset, Howard Moreno's world would be burning, and Louis Gregory would be watching, cold and satisfied, as everything the man had built turned to ashes. Justice, it turned out, was just another kind of operation, and Lewis had always excelled at operations. The press conference was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the Portland Press Club. Lewis had arranged it through contacts, journalists who owed him favors from years ago, when he provided classified information that broke major stories while keeping his own name out of it. But first, there was one more thing to handle. At 10 a.m., Lewis walked into Stuart Huffman's office at Portland Police Bureau headquarters. The police chief looked up from his desk, surprise and wariness crossing his face. Mr. Gregory, I wasn't expecting you. We need to talk. Privately. Huffman dismissed his secretary and closed the door. What can I do for you? You can tell me why you were meeting with Cliff Molina and Ed Santos last night at a bar in Northwest Portland. Huffman's face went carefully blank. I don't know what you're talking about. Lewis pulled out his phone and showed him Troy's photographs. Don't lie to me, Chief. I have time-stamped photos, video, and records showing you were there for over an hour. So I'll ask again, why were you meeting with Howard Moreno's associates after Ed Santos tried to access my daughter's hospital room? Huffman sagged in his chair. It's not what you think. Then explain it. Santos called me. Said he needed to talk about the Moreno case. When I got there, Molina was with him. They were trying to convince me that Howard was being railroaded, that you were using your influence to manipulate the investigation. And I told them to go to hell. I told them that the evidence against Howard was solid, that Lucy's testimony was credible, and that if they tried to interfere with witnesses or evidence, I'd arrest them myself. Lewis studied him. Why should I believe you? Because I've spent 30 years building my career on integrity. And because Huffman opened his desk drawer and pulled out a file. Because I've been investigating Howard Moreno for 2 years. Lewis took the file. Inside were surveillance photos, financial records, testimony from witnesses, all documenting the same corruption that Lewis had uncovered. Why didn't you act on this before? Lewis demanded. I tried. Every time I got close, someone higher up would shut it down. The district attorney would decline to prosecute. Evidence would disappear. Witnesses would recant. Moreno has too much power, too many people in his pocket. Bad. He had too much power. Past tense. Huffman met his eyes. When you walked into that hospital room and I realized who you were, I knew everything was about to change. Because Howard Moreno can't buy you, can't intimidate you, and can't make you disappear. You're the one person in this city who could take him down. So you're saying you're on my side? I'm saying I want justice. For Lucy, for all the people Moreno has hurt over the years, and for this city that he's corrupted. If you're the person who could deliver that justice, then yes, I'm on your side. Lewis made a decision. He pulled out a USB drive and placed it on Huffman's desk. This contains everything I've compiled on Moreno's network. Names, dates, financial transactions, communications. It's yours. Use it to clean up your department and this city. Huffman picked up the drive carefully, like it was a live grenade. This is everything I found. There's probably more, but this is enough to get started. The FBI will have their own copy, as will the state attorney general. And in 4 hours, the media will have it too. You're going public? I am. Because the people of this city deserve to know how corrupt their government has become. And because the only way to fix a system this broken is to expose it completely. Huffman nodded slowly. It's going to be ugly. Good. Let be ugly. Maybe then people will pay attention. As Lewis stood to leave, Huffman called out, Mr. Gregory? Thank you. For not giving up. For fighting for your daughter. And for reminding me why I became a cop in the first place. Make sure those responsible face justice, Chief. That's all the thanks I need. At 1:45 p.m., Lewis stood in the wings of the Portland Press Club's main conference room, watching journalists file in. Every major outlet was represented. Local news, state newspapers, even some national reporters who'd heard rumors of a major scandal breaking. James stood beside him, reviewing their presentation one last time. You sure you want to do this? Once this goes public, there's no taking it back. I'm sure. Lewis, some of these revelations are going to shock people. The level of corruption, the number of officials involved, it's going to shake faith in the entire city government. Good. Maybe they'll elect better leaders next time. At 2 p.m. exactly, Lewis walked onto the stage. The room went quiet as journalists recognized him, or at least recognized the authority in his bearing. My name is Lewis Gregory, he began. 5 days ago, my 8-year-old daughter was thrown from a second-story balcony by her grandfather, City Councilman Howard Moreno. She survived with a broken arm, multiple contusions, and psychological trauma that will take years to heal. Howard Moreno claimed it was an accident. It was not. He clicked a remote, and the screen behind him lit up with Lucy's hospital photo, bruised, broken, but alive. My daughter was attacked because she accidentally overheard her grandfather discussing criminal activities. Specifically, she heard him reference offshore accounts, bribery of public officials, and efforts to hide assets from his wife. What started as a case of attempted murder has uncovered something much larger, a network of corruption that has infected Portland's city government for over a decade. Another click. The screen showed a web diagram of Howard Moreno's connections. Over the past 5 days, with the help of the FBI, the state attorney general, and various investigative resources, I have compiled evidence of the following crimes. Embezzlement of over $47 million through shell companies and offshore accounts. Bribery of public officials, including at least one judge and multiple city council members. Fraudulent business practices and bid rigging on city contracts. And systematic abuse of power to enrich himself while betraying the public. Trust. The room erupted with questions. Lewis held up a hand. I will take questions afterward. First, I want you to understand the scope of what we're talking about. Howard Moreno built his empire through corruption, intimidation, and the complicity of people who should have stopped him. Some of those people were paid off. Others were coerced. But all of them failed in their duty to protect this city and its citizens. He clicked through slides showing financial transactions, email correspondence, and documented meetings between Howard and various officials. Judge Randolph Alexander received substantial financial benefits through his wife's stake in companies owned by Moreno's shell corporations. In exchange, he ruled favorably on 15 separate cases involving Moreno's businesses. City Council members Jose Booth, Alfredo Chambers, and Minnie King all received campaign contributions from entities connected to Moreno, and all voted to approve contracts that benefited his development company, even when there were better bids from competing firms. Police officer Bobby Raymond, who happens to be Moreno's nephew, attempted to interfere with the initial investigation into my daughter's injuries. And dozens of contractors, city planners, and business associates knew what Moreno was doing and either participated or looked the other way. Lewis paused, letting the information sink in. But here's what I want you to understand. This didn't happen in a vacuum. This happened because we, as a society, have allowed wealth and power to corrupt our institutions. We've accepted that rich men can buy influence. We've normalized the idea that justice is for those who can afford it. We've created a system where an 8-year-old child can be thrown from a balcony, and the first instinct of police is to believe the wealthy attacker instead of the victim. He looked directly at the cameras. My daughter survived, but how many others have been hurt by Howard Moreno's network? How many contractors lost their businesses because they couldn't compete with rigged bids? How many families lost their homes because Moreno's developments displaced them? How many honest officials were sidelined or fired because they refused to play along? That ends today. I am releasing all evidence I have compiled to federal authorities, state authorities, and to you, the press. I want complete transparency. I want every citizen of Portland to see exactly how their government has been corrupted, and I want everyone involved to face appropriate consequences. The room exploded with shouted questions. Lewis pointed to a reporter in the front. Mr. Gregory, are you saying that Judge Alexander should be removed from the bench? I'm saying that anyone who violated their oath of office should face consequences. Whether that's removal, prosecution, or both depends on the severity of their actions. What about your wife? Reports say she was present when your daughter was attacked. Lewis's jaw tightened. My wife made choices that I don't agree with. She will face whatever legal consequences those choices warrant. But I want to be clear, the primary villain here is Howard Moreno. Everyone else was either complicit, coerced, or too afraid to act. That doesn't excuse their behavior, but it does provide context. Do you think Howard Moreno will go to prison? I think the evidence is overwhelming. But I also know that wealthy men sometimes escape justice. That's why I'm making all of this public, so that even if the legal system fails, the court of public opinion will remember what Howard Moreno is, a man who threw his own granddaughter from a balcony to protect his criminal empire. What's next for you and your daughter? Lucy will recover. She'll heal, and she'll grow up knowing that her father fought for her, that justice exists, and that power doesn't mean you can hurt people without consequences. As for me, Lewis smiled coldly. I walked away from a career in intelligence 5 years ago because I wanted peace. But I learned something this week. Some battles you can't walk away from. And when your family is threatened, you use every skill, every resource, and every ounce of determination to protect them. That's what I've done. That's what I'll continue to do. The press conference lasted 90 minutes. By the time Lewis left the stage, his phone was exploding with messages. The story was already breaking on every news outlet. Social media was erupting, and Howard Moreno's carefully constructed empire was crumbling in real time. Troy met him in the hallway. It's done. The dossier is everywhere. FBI just issued 15 more warrants. State AG is calling for a special investigation. And 3 city council members just announced they're resigning. Good. What about Howard? In custody again. Bail revoked after the press conference. His lawyer tried to argue it was a media circus, but the judge, not Alexander, a federal judge, said the evidence was too substantial to ignore. And Ignacio Robertson surrendered to federal authorities an hour ago. He's cooperating fully. Lewis felt a grim satisfaction. The dominoes were falling, exactly as he'd planned. But there was one more domino that hadn't fallen yet. Where's Kristen? Still at her mother's house. Bernadette called me. She says Kristen wants to talk to you. Tell her I'll talk to her after Lucy is released from the hospital. Not before. Lewis, she's your wife. She was my wife. Now she's just the woman who stood by while her father tried to kill our daughter. Lewis headed for the parking garage. I need to get back to Lucy. She's been through enough without watching her family's drama play out on television. Back at the hospital, Lucy was awake and watching cartoons. She looked up when Lewis entered, her face brightening. Daddy, Grandma Bernadette said you were on TV. I was. Did you get Grandpa Howard in trouble? I did. He's going to prison for a very long time. Lucy thought about this. Good. He was mean. Yes, he was. Are you in trouble? No, sweetheart. I'm not in trouble. Grandma says Mommy wants to talk to you. Are you going to talk to her? Louis sat on the edge of Lucy's bed. Eventually, but not right now. Right now, I'm focused on making sure you're okay and that all the bad people face consequences for what they did. I'm okay, Daddy. It hurts, but I'm okay. Lucy took his hand with her uninjured one. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for making them listen. Louis felt his throat tighten. Always, Lucy. I will always believe you. And I will always fight for you. That's what dads do. I know. She squeezed his hand. That's why you're the best dad ever. Outside Lucy's room, Louis allowed himself one moment of emotion. His daughter had been hurt. His family was shattered. And he'd just burned down half of Portland's power structure. But Lucy was alive. She was safe. And she knew her father loved her enough to go to war for her. That was what mattered. Everything else, Howard's imprisonment, Kristen's betrayal, the political fallout, was just cleanup. The war was over. Louis Gregory had won. 2 weeks later, Louis sat in a conference room at the FBI's Portland field office, reviewing the final pieces of the investigation. Special Agent Brandon Hurley had just finished walking him through the charges. Howard Moreno is facing 47 federal charges, including racketeering, fraud, money laundering, bribery, and attempted murder. The DA has also filed state charges. If convicted on all counts, he's looking at life in prison without parole. And the others? Judge Alexander has been arrested and removed from the bench. He's facing 15 years. Ignacio Robertson is cooperating in exchange for a reduced sentence, probably 8 to 10 years and permanent disbarment. The 3 council members are facing various charges. 2 have taken plea deals. The 3rd is fighting it. Bobby Raymond, suspended from a force, under investigation. He claims he didn't know what his uncle was doing, but we found evidence he was feeding information to Moreno. He'll probably face obstruction charges. And Kristen, Hully's expression softened. That's complicated. She didn't directly participate in the financial crimes, but she did fail to report child abuse, and she obstructed the initial investigation. The DA is offering a plea deal, probation, mandatory counseling, and supervised visitation with Lucy, if you agree. Louis stared at the document. His wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, sitting across town in a lawyer's office, waiting to learn her fate. What does Lucy want? According to Dr. Grace Gray's report, Lucy misses her mother, but also feels betrayed by her. She's conflicted. Then we follow Lucy's lead. If she wants supervised visitation, we set it up. If she doesn't, Kristen waits until Lucy is ready. And you? I'm done with Kristen. I've filed for divorce. Full custody of Lucy, which she's not contesting. Once that's finalized, she can rebuild her life however she wants. But she won't be part of mine. Hully nodded. Understood. For what it's worth, Mr. Gregory, what you did, exposing all this corruption, it's going to change this city. Let's hope it changes it for the better. After leaving the FBI office, Louis drove to the hospital where Lucy was finally being discharged. She'd spent 2 weeks recovering, both physically and emotionally. Dr. Grace Gray had been working with her daily, helping her process the trauma. Lucy was dressed and ready to go, her cast covered in signatures and drawings from the nurses who'd cared for her. Bernadette was there too, packing up Lucy's things. Ready to go home, sweetheart? Louis asked. Yes. Can we get ice cream on the way? We can get whatever you want. As they walked out of the hospital, Lucy held Louis's hand tightly. Bernadette walked on her other side, the 3 of them forming a new kind of family, broken and rebuilt from trauma, but stronger for it. Daddy, Lucy asked as they reached the car. What happens now? Now we go home. We heal. We move forward. Will Grandpa Howard ever get out? No, sweetheart. He's going to prison for the rest of his life. Good. Then after a pause, I still love Mommy, even though she did bad things. Louis's heart ached. I know you do. And that's okay. You're allowed to love someone and still be hurt by their choices. Will I see her again? If you want to, when you're ready. But there's no rush, Lucy. You set the pace. They drove through Portland streets, the city going about its business. unaware that one small girl's bravery had brought down an empire of corruption. News vans were still camped outside Howard Moreno's mansion, journalists still breaking stories about the scandal. But for Louis and Lucy, the chaos was fading into the background. They had each other. They had Bernadette, who'd proven herself when it mattered. They had James and Troy and a network of friends who'd rallied to help. That night, after Lucy was asleep in her own bed for the first time in 2 weeks, Louis sat on his back porch with a glass of whiskey and his phone. A text from Troy, heading back to Seattle. Call if you need anything. It was good to be operational again. Thanks for everything. I owe you. You don't owe me anything. We're brothers. That's what brothers do. A text from James. Dinner this weekend? Bring Lucy. We can celebrate her coming home. She'd like that. Thank you, James. For everything. That's what family is for. A text from Stuart Huffman. City Council is voting to implement new ethics requirements and transparency measures. Your press conference started something important, Mr. Gregory. Thank you. Make sure it sticks, Chief. Portland deserves better than what it had. And finally, a text from an unknown number that Louis almost deleted before recognizing the words. I'm sorry. I know that's not enough, but I am sorry. Can we talk? Kristen. Louis stared at the message for a long time. Part of him wanted to respond with anger, with accusations, with all the hurt and betrayal that still burned in his chest. But mostly he just felt tired. He typed, not yet. Focus on getting healthy. Focus on becoming the person Lucy needs you to be. When you're ready, really ready, we can talk about supervised visitation. But that's months away, maybe years. Lucy gets to decide. I understand. Tell her I love her. Tell her yourself. When she's ready to hear it. Louis deleted the text thread and set his phone aside. Tomorrow, there would be more interviews, more legal proceedings, more pieces to clean up from the explosion he'd triggered. But tonight, his daughter was safe in her bed. His family, the family that mattered, was intact. And Howard Moreno was in a cell where he would spend the rest of his life paying for his crimes. Justice had been served. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Louis Gregory had gone to war for his daughter. He'd used every skill, every contact, every ounce of determination he possessed. And he'd won. That was all that mattered. Inside the house, Lucy stirred in her sleep and called out softly. Louis went to her immediately, sitting on the edge of her bed and taking her hand. I'm here, sweetheart. I had a bad dream. Want to talk about it? Grandpa Howard was there. But then you came, and you made him go away. Louis smiled gently. That's not a bad dream, Lucy. That's a memory. And it's true. I did make him go away. And he's never coming back. Promise? Promise. Lucy squeezed his hand. I love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything in this world. As Lucy drifted back to sleep, Louis sat in the darkness and let himself finally feel the weight of everything that had happened. The fear, the rage, the determination, the victory. He'd left the intelligence community 5 years ago, thinking he was done fighting wars. But he learned something important these past 2 weeks. Some wars choose you. Some battles can't be avoided. And when someone threatens your family, you don't hesitate, don't compromise, and don't stop until they've been utterly defeated. Howard Moreno had thrown an 8-year-old girl from a balcony. Louis Gregory had destroyed him for it. That was justice. That was revenge. That was what fathers did. And as Louis finally let himself rest, knowing his daughter was safe and his enemies were defeated, he felt something he hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. The war was over. They had won. And tomorrow, they would begin to heal. Epilogue, 6 months later. Louis stood in the backyard of their new house. A fresh start in a quiet Portland neighborhood far from the mansion he'd shared with Kristen. Watching Lucy play with their new golden retriever puppy. Her cast had come off months ago, and while she still occasionally had nightmares, Dr. Grace Gray reported that she was healing remarkably well. The scandal had reshaped Portland's political landscape. 16 public officials had resigned or been removed from office. 47 people had been charged with various crimes connected to Howard Moreno's network. The city had implemented sweeping ethics reforms and transparency requirements. Howard himself was in federal prison in California, serving consecutive life sentences. He would never see freedom again. Judge Randolph Alexander was awaiting trial, though his conviction was considered inevitable given the evidence. Ignacio Robertson was serving his reduced sentence and had been disbarred permanently. Cliff Molina had fled to Mexico before being arrested. Interpol was still looking for him. And Kristen had completed 9 months of intensive therapy, accepted a plea deal that resulted in 3 years probation, and was slowly, carefully rebuilding a relationship with Lucy. Supervised visitation twice a month, always with Bernadette present. Lucy was doing better with it, though trust would take years to rebuild. Bernadette had divorced Howard and was using her half of his legitimate assets to fund a nonprofit helping domestic abuse survivors and their children. She'd become a powerful advocate, using her experience to help others escape situations like the one she'd endured for decades. Troy had visited twice, always bringing Lucy gifts and making her laugh with outrageous stories. James came every Sunday for dinner, the brothers closer now than they'd ever been. And Lewis had returned to his architecture practice, but with a new focus. He was designing affordable housing, community centers, and spaces that would help rebuild the parts of Portland that had been neglected while Howard Moreno lined his pockets. He'd also quietly helped 3 other families navigate similar situations. Parents whose children had been hurt by powerful people who needed someone who understood how to fight that kind of battle. He didn't advertise this work, but word got around, and when someone really needed help, they found their way to Louis Gregory. "Daddy," Lucy called out. "Come play with us." Louis walked over, letting the puppy jump on him while Lucy giggled. She looked happy, healthy, and safe. That was all he'd ever wanted. His phone buzzed. A text from Stuart Huffman. "Thought you'd want to know. The city just announced the Lucy Gregory Child Protection Act. Requires mandatory investigations of all child injuries, regardless of family status or wealth. Your daughter changed the world, Mr. Gregory." Louis showed the text to Lucy, who was now old enough to understand what it meant. "They named a law after me?" she asked, eyes wide. "They did. Because you were brave enough to tell the truth, even when it was hard. Does that mean other kids will be safer? It means other kids will have a better chance of being protected. You did that, Lucy. You." She thought about this, then smiled. Cool. That was his daughter, resilient, brave, and already moving forward. As the sun set over Portland, Louis thought about the journey they'd been on. The pain, the betrayal, the battle, and the victory. He'd gone to war for his daughter. He'd won, and while the scars would always be there, so would the knowledge that when it mattered most, Louis Gregory had done everything necessary to protect his family. That was enough. That was everything. Lucy laughed as the puppy knocked her over, and Louis laughed too, the sound genuine and full of hope for the future. They'd survive the darkness. Now they would live in the light, together. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.